see here. So today we're going to talk about the best language teacher might be right next door. Just wait for it to load. So that's our topic for the day. And why are we talking about this? Because if my whole department was on the same page, wouldn't that be great? You see the word PLC, professional learning communities, a lot in the education world, and sometimes they have a negative connotation because you think of it maybe as a meeting, another meeting that you have to go to, or something else that you have to do. But you might not understand why you want a professional learning community. You might have one on Twitter, you might have one outside of school through your different conferences and networks. But we're going to talk about the professional learning community in school and what that looks like. And this is I'll just leave this here for you to read. This is a definition of collaboration and why it's essential. And one of the reasons I picked this quote and why it speaks to me is that one of the things that I noticed as a teacher is that I have blind spots. So there are certain things that I really focus on and other things that I think I'm focusing on. But when I talk to my teammates, then I realize that I might have a blind spot in that area, or that might be their strength. So where I work, it's really important for us to collaborate as a team. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And the conversation is based on a podcast that my department did for We Teach Languages. It was session 101. And somebody came in and talked to our department, and we just talked about how we collaborate. And that's where the idea for this session came from, because a lot of people talk about collaboration, but they don't exactly know how to start or what that looks like. So we decided to flesh that out a little bit and just share with you what it looks like for our department and see if there's some ideas that maybe you can take away with you. So first of all, there are 10 teachers in my department, and we offer 3 languages, Spanish, French, and German. We have over the years offered Latin, but the teacher left. And for a while, we almost offered Chinese. We had a teacher, but he didn't stay. But we have about a core group of 10 teachers, and we have added about a half position every year for the past couple years. So our department is in a state of growth, steady growth. This is what the department looked like a few years ago. So you can see most of the members of the department, and then you can see this rock in the corner. We're going to talk about the rock a little later, and I'll tell you what the rock is, but this is our core department. Since the podcast last year, I think, Nia has moved on. She's now department chairperson at a feeder middle school. So we still work with Nia, but she's at the middle school level and she sends kids to us. Cassie is moving out of state, and so is Cora. So we'll have 3 new teachers next year. What did things look like before we collaborated, and why did we change that? So I'm going to let Cora, we're going to hear from some of the members of my team. I'm going to let Cora talk to you about that.
But I think one reason we've been so successful is when I first started, Katrina and I collaboratively planned, but as far as the Spanish team, there weren't Spanish teams, just a bunch of people that taught Spanish. And we did not have a set meeting time at all. And I think one reason we've been so successful is because we have specific days that each team meets, and people are respectful of that being the meeting day for that team and making sure that they're there as much as possible, and also respecting each other's time when we're in that meeting. Mm-hmm. So like making sure we're accomplishing those specific goals that Nia mentioned that the team leader would set.
So we had a lot of teachers but we didn't have any agreements. So the teachers couldn't agree on how to teach. We didn't agree. We couldn't even agree that we should all speak in the target language. Because we couldn't agree as teachers, we couldn't agree what we wanted to do for students either. And we saw that we were losing a lot of kids in the upper levels of our programs. We have a rather large school. There are about 2,300 students. So I guess on average, there are 600 kids who start in Spanish 1. And by the time they got to AP, we would have one class of 15. So for us, that was evidence or for me, that was evidence that something was broken. So when I started to collaborate, Cora was my teacher next door. She was in the classroom right next door to me. And she really wanted to do more than just say, hey, I'm doing this today. What are you doing? Oh, that sounds good. I can do that. We actually just started to plan lessons together. And let's see here. And so Cora and I started to work together, and then that was about 10 years ago. We started to identify other people who we thought we could get on board with us. Who else in our department do we think we can get to collaborate with us? Because we know that if two of us are planning a lesson, it's less work for us. We can take turns, we can do it together, we can fine-tune things. She sees things that I don't see. And as teachers left the department, I started to hire teachers and tell them that we collaborate. And at the beginning, we weren't really collaborating yet in the way that we do now, but I knew that that's something that I wanted. So in education, there's something called clarity of instruction. And I include that clarity when I hire teachers. So teachers know that the expectation is that they're going to collaborate on a team. I explain to them what that looks like, how much of a time commitment that is or isn't, why we do that, and I tell them that they're joining a team. So I'm not just looking for a Spanish teacher or a French teacher. I'm looking for somebody who is going to be a part of the team, perhaps bring something to the table that we are lacking or that I think we need. For instance, this year, I really needed another heritage speaker, another native speaker. So that was really important that whoever I hired had that capability. All my teachers know the expectation is that they can teach any level over time. So over time, I hope that all teachers have the expectation of teaching all levels, because I need them to know the whole vertical sequence of what's going on so we can better serve our students. So when I'm hiring, I tell teachers that, and I also tell them that that might not be an environment that they want to work in, and that's okay. But if I bring someone in and they weren't truthful about wanting to collaborate, then it's just not going to work with my teachers, because they really want somebody else to share the load with. Now, wouldn't it be great if everybody was on board? Wouldn't it be just wonderful if all 10 teachers in my department just loved collaborative planning the same way I do, and that most of the teachers do? But I think you know, because you're out in the world, that that's just not how things work. And I used to get very frustrated about it, and I would think, what am I going to do? How am I going to talk to this person? And then I realized that I was spending too much time trying to convince them. And then I realized after we had this podcast that people that I thought were on board really weren't. So I'll have Nia share her experience with you.
When I came in, I taught previously by myself. And when I heard that we were doing collaborative planning, when I got the job, I was like, I wonder how that's going to work. I thought that initially I was, and I'm just going to be very honest, I was against it because I felt like it's taking away my personal pedagogy and how I do things. And that's normally what I would imagine other teachers may think as they are thinking about collaborative planning. But I have completely have changed my opinion wholeheartedly. I just think, as I said in the beginning, good planning and good delivery is simply what it is. And if you have a good plan and you have others there to help you, it's almost like you can't do it by yourself. Just as Katrina was saying, there's so many blind spots. There's so many things that I don't see. And it's definitely helped me in my professional and personal life.
So that's Nia. And it was a surprise to me to learn that, because she'd already been teaching with us for 3/4 of a year. And I didn't know that she was having thoughts like that. But I'm glad that she gave it a chance and saw the benefits of collaborative planning. I have another teacher who I refer to as a rock, and I used to try and water this rock. I mean, he just didn't want to participate. He sort of pretended that he did. You might have a teacher like that. They say all the things, they nod, they're very nice, and then they go back to their classroom and they do what they're going to do. And I decided that I'm not watering this rock anymore. We're just moving on without the rock. I have other teachers who want to talk and discuss big ideas, and I'm going to focus on my garden from now on. And the rock's been there for 48 years, and it's either going to get grown over or it's going to move. And you know, what we see when someone isn't on board, because now all my teachers have these agreements that we've made and ways to teach the kids, and the kids start to see when they switch teachers, oh, this isn't the same as what I was getting over there. And you know, kids, they complain, their parents complain. Kids are switching languages just to get out of there. So I don't spend any more time on my rock. What are the logistics of collaborative planning? How does it look? Will's going to tell you a little bit about that.
I think the role that coming up with the ground rules is an important factor in setting up any collaborative team meeting. I know like other schools will try to probably have some type of meeting, but they won't set these ground rules in place, so that then that's when conflict comes up, that people aren't really aware of what the role is and how do I play a part into this team. Whereas if we all come up with the ground rules and the different things that will lead our discussion, then that will help us come with a better result in the end and a better working environment.
Okay. So I don't know if you guys can see this. I have this screen here in my way. But
we can still view it, everything.
You can still view everything? Okay, mm-hmm. Thank you. We have set meeting times. Sometimes there is space in the day for that our school has set aside for us to collaborate. More often than not, the teachers have talked to each other and set a time after school when they like to meet. One thing that we do in the beginning of the year is set up norms, and we go through a process, and then we come up with meeting expectations. So this is an example of some meeting expectations that we came up with at the beginning of the year. And you can see number one is accept non-closure. Now, we don't have a lot of time to meet. We're meeting for like a half an hour, 30 minutes. That's all we've got. And then teachers are allowed to go and they want to go. So there's a lot of accepting non-closure, leaving things open-ended, even though they might not be as perfect as you want them to be. It's really important for my teachers to have fun, to remember to speak to the group agenda, to be fully present, and to respect one another. These are just some pictures of them having fun. They like to do twin day, dress up day, rainbow day. Those aren't meetings, but those are still things that they like to do. Before teachers meet in their teams, so we have things broken down primarily by language and level. So Spanish 2 meets together, Spanish 3 meets together. Those are probably our biggest teams. We also have smaller teams. German 1 and Spanish 1 actually plan together. They do the same kinds of things. They just do it in separate languages. And my AP teachers, my AP French teachers and my AP Spanish teachers meet together because they face a lot of the same challenges. So they plan units together. That's really important to my French teacher because otherwise she would be the only person teaching her course. She's the only person teaching her course and she has no one to bounce ideas off of. The picture that you see here are things that we think about as language teachers when we're planning. And I made this visual to help teachers hold that in their, because it's hard to hold in your head, so that they have that. And for example, the Spanish, each team has a lead person. So the Spanish 3 teacher meets with me as the department chair, and we go over the big vision things. We go over questions relating to the can-do statements, the essential question. What's the whole sketch of the unit going to look like? And we talk about that stuff before the Spanish 3 lead goes to her meeting. And the reason for that is that it's really hard to think about this, all these things, the essential questions, the modes, how to internalize all that stuff. And then this is from the Research for Better Teaching. This is sort of the pyramid of teaching. Teacher, you're focusing on routines, time, space, and then all the way up at the top, you see curriculum design, planning, and objectives. I think what happens a lot is that you have new teachers, younger teachers to the profession, maybe 5 years or less, and you're asking them to do curriculum design and planning and objectives, and they're really just not there yet. So it's important for me to meet with those teachers and help them keep that part going so that they can focus on their routines and their momentum and wherever it is that they are. But I think we jump too high to the top with teachers before they're really ready, and it just takes a lot of time to internalize all that stuff. So what does it mean that they collaboratively plan? So I'm going to show you some images of what that exactly looks like. They definitely plan lessons. They're planning the what, the how. They start backwards, always with the end goal in mind. So calendars play a role in how they are planning. Where are the big blocks going to be? What authentic resources are we using? What are the can-do statements? How are we going to do, what's the order going to be? How long are we going to spend? And they do come up with the same lesson. So here's an example. This is from, some of you are probably Start Talk teachers. You've seen this format. I don't tell my teachers how to write up lessons, and this isn't something that they are required to do. No one is asking them to submit a lesson plan. This is for them. And this is important to them because we have like a first-year teacher on the Spanish 1 team, and she doesn't get to go in a lot of classrooms. She's part-time. She can't go watch somebody else teach. So they tried to write things up as detailed as they could to help her teach the lessons. So you've got the learning experiences, you've got the I do, you've got the questions. Sometimes they're writing which parts you can talk in English, you can use English, or which you can see the we do there, switch to English. Which parts are we staying in the target language? And then at the bottom, you can see materials. They assign different jobs to help take care of the lesson. Maybe somebody looks for an authentic resource. Somebody might type something up. Somebody might print something out. So they take care of all that stuff. And yes, they plan the lessons together, but they're human, and they might move faster or slower. We're teaching human beings. Certain classes just work differently. And in schools in America, there are all sorts of random things that happen. There are field trips, there are pep rallies, there's all sorts of things that impact learning. And depending on when you have students, you might be faster or slower than your colleagues. So this is sort of an example of, okay, we're going to give an assessment and here's just some options. So they're thinking of all the options that you could have. So this is all in a Google document, and all the teachers collaborate. They can type each other's notes. If somebody teaches something before someone else, they'll say, hey, make sure you do this, don't do this. You might want to do this first before you do this. So they're constantly talking about the lessons. If you're planning the lessons together, it does not mean that you teach the same way, because everybody is their own individual. I'll let Cassie talk about that first.
If we get students accustomed to routines and we get accustomed to planning routines into our lessons, then we can change the content, and we have a strong student-centered routine that they're familiar with that helps them work through the new material and be right in the language.
So Cassie mentioned routines, and even though Cassie's very theatrical, she might sing and dance, she's very into show tunes. She's going to teach a little bit differently than Jen or Mallory, who are a little bit quieter. But we all have routines that we use across the department, across languages. So something that you might see, just really simple, is a sign for switching in and out of the language. It's nice for students because they can go from teacher to teacher and that routine is the same. There are also learning routines, and this is just an example of a document that we created, especially since we do incorporate new teachers into our department. What are the routines that are sort of our go-to strategies? Because we don't make lots and lots of different things. We don't view every day like I have to make all these things. We keep it to like 10 to 14 routines, like headlines, See, Think, Wonder. These are all from Project Zero, Visible Thinking, from Harvard. And we just sort of sketched out why we would use it, what modes it works, some tips, possible obstacles. And it makes it easy for us to plan, and it makes it easy for us to share across languages, and it makes it really easy for the students as they go from teacher to teacher up through levels, or if they switch in the middle of the year, to have an idea what's going on. We have another folder with just some more explanations of the different strategies we use. And then this year we started talking about which strategies we think we're using at which level. So how are we sequencing things so that it builds to, ideally our students are leaving with an intermediate proficiency. What are we doing to scaffold them to that? If I want my students to do a Socratic seminar by year 4 or AP, what am I doing to get them ready for that? And so we just have lots and lots of conversations. We just talk about proficiency and teaching all the time. And that's how we spend our time meeting. When we meet, I'm not giving them dates and things from school and, make sure you do this by this. I give that to them in writing, and then we save our time together for these kind of discussions. What are the positive outcomes? Let's hear what they say.
You have to surrender I for we. You have to surrender I for we, because it's no longer just the way you do things, but it's what's best for really the team and what's best for the students. So it's no longer just my way.
So to Nia's point, we are definitely a team. We are a unit that works together no matter what language we're teaching, and that's to the benefit of the student. From an administrator or department chair standpoint, it makes it really easy for me to give feedback because I can go into Spanish 2 classes. I know they've got the same-ish lesson. And if I go in and I see an inside-outside circle where kids are talking to each other, so that's an example, I saw one and it wasn't working. And I realized that they were having the students do a presentational task with an interpersonal strategy. So I knew that I needed to go back to their planning group and talk to them about that being a mismatch. So I know when I go see my teacher that that's a planning problem and not a problem with that particular instructor. However, if I go see if I go in a classroom and I see somebody setting up an inside-outside circle and they're struggling with the setup, then I know, okay, that's a different issue. The teacher's having trouble just getting the kids up quickly and putting them into the circles and giving the instructions. That's something completely different. So it makes it a lot easier for me. And it makes it easier for my administrator too, because we can go and we see very similar things in the classrooms. During this time with COVID, we already had everything in Google, so we just have Google Classrooms. And one of my teachers was out on maternity leave, so I don't speak Spanish, but I ran her classroom. Another teacher posted the lessons, and then 2 other teachers graded the assignments because we all know what everyone's doing. My French teacher can help students. She can't help students with the Spanish work per se, but she knows what they're doing. So if a question comes up and she just happens to be around, she can answer those questions. Because if we're at school and kids see us in the hallway, they don't know, they just think language teacher. And so they might ask us things or where to find things. And so it's made it really easy for us to communicate with each other, to communicate with the kids. For Google Meets, for this online learning, my teachers decided, you know what, we're going to meet together. So my 2 AP teachers had group meets together. So they would go online and then the kids from all their classes would join them. Some of the other teachers took turns. Like maybe Jen said, okay, I'm going to host Spanish 3 this week. And then another teacher hosted the next week. So it's a really great team atmosphere. But the biggest outcome we've seen is kids staying in the upper levels longer. So if we go back to the place we were 10 years ago, where we only had 15 kids taking AP Spanish, we had a huge jump one year, and the administrator at my school had a panic attack because he saw 84 kids had signed up for AP Spanish, and he thought maybe there was something wrong. And he said, is this right? And I said, you bet, that's right. I got a new French teacher. She's been with us. This will be her 3rd year next year. And she's been part-time, and she's been growing the program. Since I've been at North County for 19 years, there have only been maybe 3 kids in AP French, 4. And we've got 17 kids signed up for AP French this year. And so that's evidence to me, you know, kids stay in the language when they're learning the language. Whether they have the capacity to tell you or not that they expect to learn the language, they expect to learn the language in your class. So when I first started teaching, I thought I needed to be fun, and we have to have fun to keep the kids. And now I really understand that they want to learn the language. And so retaining those students is really important to us. This is something else that we did this year. This is a great outcome. We decided to sketch out all of our assessments that we give per quarter. So what you see here are French, Spanish, and German. There's 4 quarters in our year. And then you see the different levels, level 1, 2, 3, 4 AP. And this is in progress. So we've spent 2 or 3 meetings on this, and we just sort of outlined what are the assessments that we're giving students, the summative assessments, the end assessment, the end goal, and what is that, and how frequently are we doing it? So it's color coded. There's interpersonal writing, interpersonal speaking, presentational writing, and presentational speaking. So those are the modes that we focus on here. And for Spanish, I don't know, you can't see exactly what they wrote, but you can see a lot of pink in quarter 2. Now, pink is presentational writing. So my teachers were getting crushed with grading. And when you're in it, when you're just in it teaching and grinding it out, you don't always think about these things, but seeing it visually was pretty remarkable. You can also see, if you look at Spanish 2 across the whole year, that most of the things that are asked of students is presentational writing. So we're able then to think about how are we going to change that so that there isn't so much presentational writing all at once. I mean, if you're on Spanish 2, Spanish 3 team, you're just in the weeds all the time grading essays. This is a close-up of what it looks like. So they just wrote brief information, like it says, stereotypes, email reply, persuasive essay, missed opportunities. So it's just notes for us so that we know what exactly we were asking students to do. And that's been really great conversation for us to have. Where do I see our department headed next? Well, this year we did the Strengths Finder, which was really great. So teachers read the book and we figured out what our strengths were. And we're going to continue to build on our strengths for sure. With 3 new teachers, we're going to do a lot of capacity building and making sure that we revisit some of the things that we've talked about previously, maybe how to, what our can-do statements, how do we release students to do things on their own so that we are not the ones in the front of the classroom, that whole idea of I do, we do, you do, and doing some internal PD. I'm losing 2 amazing teachers, so if you're getting them, you're so lucky. But in order to build capacity, I can't be the only one with information, and I can't be the only one giving them information. They've got to go out and get it too, from webinars like this. We're going to go to conferences, be it virtual or in person. We try and encourage teachers to present, because presenting information to other people really makes us reflect on how we're teaching. And my buddy Cora and I, what we would do was we would write sessions based on where we wanted to be, and then that would force us to get there. So we'll do a lot of that kind of capacity building, and just revisiting back and getting our new teachers up to speed, because this will be a new experience for them. And my teachers who are staying are going into different leadership roles within the department. So some of you are probably like, but I'm the only one at my school who wants to do this. What can I do? You know, there are certain things you can do, even if it's just 1 or 2 of you. So here are the things that you can always do that are free and easy. So you can always invite others into your class to give you feedback. Now they can't, if they're at a different school, they can't come into your actual classroom. But you can invite people into your virtual classroom just to look at your assignments and maybe check out a video of you teaching. One of the things that helped us the most was just going in each other's classrooms. Something that I do with teachers, if they're on the Spanish 2 team or the German 1 team, I go take them to see their lesson taught by a different teacher, just so they can see what the kids are doing. Yes, they're going to see what the teacher's doing too, but they get to see their lesson and what it looks like done by someone else. Kudos are really important. Whenever I go into a teacher's classroom, I leave a card and give them some feedback on what they did well. These actually came from our district. And so this is for Mallory, and I said, I really like the way you had students explain the instructions to each other in Spanish in order to check for understanding. So the feedback's very specific. It's something that I really liked in Mallory's classroom and that I want her to keep doing. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Catalyst, but Catalyst is based on the TEL documents for instruction, and there are domains like planning, feedback, professional development. It's free, and we went in and all my teachers registered, and I think I have the link here. And you can upload evidence and have somebody anywhere in the world look at it and give you feedback on it. You can talk to people who are working on the same kind of things as you. Let's say you're really struggling with ideas for how to get kids to speak interpersonally or how to get kids to stay in the target language. You can find other people on Catalyst who are working on those same things and collaborate with them. It's really just a wonderful resource for language teachers. Definitely share learning routines across languages. If you don't have another teacher who teaches the same language who you can work with, share with someone else, talk it out. It's really important to talk through ideas and talk about how you're going to apply them. I think for language teachers, a lot of times we sit in PD and you go to webinars, you're here right now, and you go to conferences, but you can sit in 20 conferences, but if you don't work on the application process, you're not going to change how you're teaching. So it's really important to have a sounding board of somebody to talk through those ideas. And then finally, collaborate with somebody in another school. If you can't find somebody in another school, just contact me directly and I will help you find somebody in another school who would want to work with you. You know, now you definitely have Zoom and Google Meets and Skype and all these different ways that are pretty normal for connecting with other people in this particular age. So find somebody else to talk through things with. And then now we have time, I think, I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions. So here we are.
Yeah, Teresa, I saw Charmaine, Teresa, some questions at the beginning and some questions at the end.
So I've had some teachers kind of sharing, you know, sometimes they're pretty isolated in their school. Or sometimes they don't have other teachers that are working in their language. So there's actually been some really great conversation in the chat of people sharing potential resources or just giving each other supportive feedback. But yeah, this is kind of our dedicated question space if people have specific things that they would like to ask Katrina. Okay, we've got a great question from Michelle. How do you make time for meetings when all of you have a different schedule and are only 20 minutes of required and to do so in only 20 minutes of time at the end of the day?
Well, it's always tough. And we just work through as much as we can. So some teachers are okay with giving more time to collaborating, and they're like, you know what, I just really want to do this, so let's talk through in our 20 minutes, but I'm going to keep working, or a couple of us are going to keep working, and everybody else goes. And you know, you can only start where you are with the time that you have, and what you see and what I've described did not happen in 1 year. I mean, you have to give yourself time to build the machine where now we have this machine where somebody new comes in, we're just keeping going with what we've started. So we only were working on like one unit or one lesson and making those better. You know, we started with something really simple, like just authentic resources. Like, let's just get authentic resources. Let's find those. So if you only have 20 minutes, then just start small with one thing. 1 year we just looked at all of our lessons and was like, is this a mode of communication? And even if we couldn't fix that, even if I identified it, like there's certain things that we still have and I don't know how to make it better yet, but I know that I want to. But I just don't have all the time in the world. Nobody has all the time. So that goes back to leaving things unfinished. We mark it as something that we want to change, but we don't know how to change it, and we keep going. So maybe that will help. I guess I can stop sharing this. Okay.
So we have another question from Inga. So for all languages at your school, do they teach the same unit at all of the levels?
It's more aligned in certain levels than others. You know, just like a lot of you, my district also tells us what we have to do. So German 1 and Spanish 1 are very close in when they're teaching things, but there's some differences. French and Spanish are probably closer overall, but then you have maybe level 3, 4, things might start to diverge because you've got some cultural things that are different. So maybe there isn't as close planning between languages at those levels. But I would say at levels 1 and 2, it's a lot closer. And I would say French, but the person who's teaching French doesn't really participate yet. So, yeah. So right now, like I can tell you that German 1 is a few weeks ahead of Spanish 1.
Katrina?
Yes.
Some teacher just wondering, could you share the PowerPoint with us?
Yeah, this is all recorded, I believe, isn't it?
Yeah, it's recorded.
It's hard to share. It's better to have it as a recording, because if I share it as just a PowerPoint, the quotes disappear from the people.
Oh.
Because there's like video embedded, so it just doesn't share very well.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
I mean, if there's specific things that you want access to, just I'm pretty easy to find on the internet. They can email me or Twitter me, and I'll send it.
Thank you.
So we have a question from Benha. What are the most useful 3 actions you would recommend if I would want to start this kind of cooperative group at my school? Top 3.
1, I would say find somebody to work with, like one person, any person. Find somebody who's at least willing to sit with you. And then I would say set a time so that you remember to do it, because it's real easy to just be like, oh, I don't have time. Like all these things got in the way. And set some sort of accountability for making that happen. Because if you set aside the space, you will do something. And this sounds really silly, but my teachers used to have sticker charts like in their closet with smiley faces. And if they did it, they just gave themselves like a sticker. Because it wasn't when you're first starting out, it's not very comfortable. And even though I say my team plans together, it's not like a dream. It's 10 people, 10 people with 10 very different personalities. And, what is okay for me might not be okay for you. So if Teresa has to teach on Friday and it's Thursday night and she still doesn't have the materials uploaded to the site, that's not okay with Teresa, and she starts to freak out. And so that's something that happened in my department, and I made them figure out how to deal with it. And they said, okay, if things aren't uploaded by this time, then you have to make copies for me so that I have time. And so they had to work through and make some of those things clearer for each other, because people have different pain points of like I'm a German teacher, like things are very much on, like I have this certain time schedule, but that's not true for all of my colleagues. And so we've had to talk through that. I did see Catherine Usalan's question about Harvard Project Zero, and we do use a lot of those routines just because we know they work. They're high yield strategies. They're great for student engagement. We also use a lot of AVID strategies. You can look it up, AVID. And so we don't really get into a game of what the best language strategy. We're looking at overall learning. You know, what's going to help my students learn? Because I teach in a pretty high poverty area. My students don't go on to college not because they're not capable of it. It's a choice. So they're not staying in my class because they have dreams of going to college and they need credits. They're staying because they're learning the language and they like it. And so our philosophy in our department is, what are we doing right now that's helping the student, be a better person right now? I don't have time to wait for them to one day travel to the country that they're studying. That may or may not happen. What are we doing now that's going to help them with their thinking and understanding? More questions?
There are two more questions.
Yeah, so one of the questions we had is from Ricardo. So how do you work with teachers that are very reluctant to change? From their perspective, everything's perfect, even though the results aren't showing that everything's perfect.
Well, it sounds like a rock situation. Yeah, change is really hard for people. Nobody wants to be told what to do in any situation. That person probably knows that it's not working, but this is a really scary walk for a lot of people. You're asking them to be vulnerable. You're asking them to show what they're doing in the classroom. And that's just not, that's a vulnerable place. And we didn't all jump in at the same time. We jumped in, with one, and then two, and then three, and then maybe it was this team, and it was a slow thing. And so by the time that we incorporated the people who were reluctant, they were more on board. Sometimes those people ended up leaving, and when they left, like I have a teacher, I can think of her, wonderful colleague, and she didn't realize until she left what we were doing, and so I think of something that one of my principals said. He said, you don't know if you're watering the seed or planting the seed or growing. You don't know where you are. So she got it in the end. She just wasn't with us when she did. So I mean, there's a lot of letting go of control. I mean, just hold on to your vision and give it time.
So we have another question for Jennifer, where it's not quite a rock situation, where you might have two teachers who just cannot stand each other. So maybe they actually both want to work with you, but they refuse to participate in anything if the other person is in the room.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't have time for that. I'm from New Jersey, and New Jersey, we just don't we don't play with that. I mean, you're adults, and I'm not calling home and saying like, your husband, oh, can I talk to your husband? Like, could you get along better with so-and-so? I mean, you're in a work environment, and I had two people and they were like oil and water. But at the end of the day, I don't care about you and your personal conflict. We're here for students, and I need you to best serve students. And this is childish, and it's not good modeling for students. And, you know, I just, that's tough. And that's different depending on, you know, your personality. My personality doesn't mind that kind of conflict, but I know my colleagues, they struggle with that, and they come running to me. It's very tough. But yeah, I mean, if you can't do it, find somebody else to have that hard conversation with them, because you're here for students.
Let's see. It looks like we've got a couple more questions coming in. So from Yingxi, how do you evaluate how the professional collaboration is working? Like, what do you kind of do to make sure the collaboration is working as the best it can?
So I definitely make sure to stop into their planning meetings. There's a couple things I look at from a department chair standpoint. Is I go into the planning meeting, I want to hear what they're talking about, and it helps me know where they are in their thinking. So for instance, I walked into a planning meeting and they were like, well, let's do a gallery walk. And I said, okay. I said, why wouldn't you do a gallery walk? Why'd you pick a gallery walk? And they said, because the students need to get up. And I said, no. I said, that's not why we're picking things. I said, you're picking strategies based on your can-do statements. You're picking strategies based on what your outcomes are, not, yes, we want kids to get up, but that's not the driver of the bus. Or if they start picking strategies and, oh, I want to do this in this unit, we can do this in this unit, but they don't have their end goal set up. So I go in for that. I can see, and this isn't me being like, you know, I'm not, at the beginning, when I was a first department chair, I wasn't asking questions like, I'm wondering why you did this. I was like, oh my God, you did this? You know, I can't believe, no. And now, you know, that's not fair to anyone. So now I go in and I say, hey, I saw this. I'm wondering why this is there. And then we have a conversation about it. And so there aren't any more like, I got you moments for them, because my teachers are human beings and they're going to make mistakes. They're in different places in their learning. And so we talk about, you know, I can see what they're doing in the written plans and their written ideas, depending on how they're fleshed out. And then we go into classrooms, and I go into classrooms pretty regularly. Like maybe in a typical year, I can go in 47 classrooms. You know, I have 10 teachers, so I'm in there a lot. They're going in each other's classrooms with me and without me, just because they want to be better at their craft. My French teacher is brand new. She taught for 10 years somewhere else. She did, you know, we're covering the book, we're covering the chapters, we're doing this grammar stuff. So this is a pretty big jump for her. And she's like, I've never been a part of a team that wants to be a better instructor. It's really exciting for me. And like I said, she's got 17 kids in AP. She's totally turned the train around. So yeah, it's just, we just constantly keep looking. And then we see, you know, for me, the tests don't necessarily, I don't really believe that data all the time, because I don't, like from my district, I don't know who's writing the test. I don't know what their understanding of things is. But I do know if they're continuing to take the class, they're getting something out of it. And, you know, we do student surveys and we talk to kids, and it's just lots of talking and conversation.
Yeah, so kind of following up on that, you know, Anthony's asking, especially sometimes if you have some potential rocks, you know, what evidence would you kind of give your administrator or other colleagues that, you know, the rocks approach is just not as successful as what you're doing? You know, what kind of evidence, like you mentioned, student feedback or other things, could you kind of give to those people who are on the fence to kind of shore up support for your approach?
So the first place that I take my administrators is to something like Catalyst and Tell documents, just because they give administrators who aren't comfortable going into language classrooms a really good framework for what they're looking for. And there are charts and things, and it says like you're looking for students talking in pairs, you know, for more than choral repetition. Are kids talking to each other? Are they asking questions? And so I give them that framework. But most administrators don't, I mean, good administrator, it doesn't matter if they speak the language. They can see like if the kids are just sitting there being compliant or if they're actually engaged somehow in learning. Like my rock, everybody knows it's a rock. Everybody knows the principal, the assistant principals, the guidance counselors. I mean, kids are literally switching languages in the middle of the marking period to get out of this class. I mean, but we're in a society that has tenure and he's not going anywhere. And you know, if more parents were vocal, maybe something would happen, but you know, I just stopped giving it energy. We just literally are cleaning up around it at this point.
We have the last two questions, Teresa.
Let's see. So, so we have two questions, one from Natalia. So, so do you have a consensus then among your teachers about, you know, using a communicative approach, not focusing on, you know, kind of using grammar-based methods instead? Is there a consensus on the types of approach in teaching?
Yeah, yes, because we definitely start at what's best for learning. And then we look at what do kids want to talk about? What are kids talking about? We're not doing, and look, I used to do it like a clothing unit or a daily routines unit. Like I don't teach any of that stuff because no offense or zero, but I don't care if you shaved today. I don't care if you did it after you brushed your teeth. I don't need me to tell you what I'm wearing or this, you know, like an example is if we did a family unit or something back in the day with birthdays and gifts. Now is it better to give or receive a gift? Who gives you the best gift? Those are the questions kids are asking. It's the same kind of vocabulary that you were looking for, but it's framed in a different way, and kids are more inclined to talk about it and they notice. So we keep things, the kids play a role in what we're teaching. Spanish, they had a problem one year. They were doing camping in Spanish 3. And my kids live close to Baltimore City. They're not camping. They were completely disconnected from this unit. And so the teachers were given this by the county. They had to sort of tweak it to make it more interesting to the kids. So they just talk about it in a different way, but they're not camping. I mean, these kids are in Baltimore City. And yes, we agree that we are using authentic resources as much as we are able to. We agree that we are focusing on the modes and we're looking at, is this a mode of communication, really? You know, I had one teacher who tried to tell me that fill in the blank and conjugating the verb was interpretive. And I said, well, he said, because you have to interpret which word it is and then conjugate it. And I said, well, you're asking kids to do two things at once, but first, it's not based on an authentic resource. Like, what's the input for the kids? That's what matters. So yes, they agree for the most part. Are there still some things that show up that maybe I would love to have changed? Sure. But I can tell you that most of the teachers I can tell you most of the students at that school have never heard the word conjugation. And that's a far place from where we were because it's all embedded.
So another question we have from our colleague Martha. So could you talk about preparing for proficiency testing from a team approach? What are some of the logistics you use or some of the ways that you kind of prepare common expectations for students?
We talk through proficiency testing a lot. So, and I don't know exactly which proficiency, well, so we don't exactly do, I can't speak exactly to proficiency testing because we don't do an apple or a stamp right now. But we do have, we do require like interpersonal speaking. So, and interpersonal speaking of kids to each other, not me talking to a kid. Spontaneous oral language production of students to students. So we basically talk through that whole logistical thing. Where are the kids sitting? What are you doing? How are you going to have your paper out to score? What are the other kids doing? I mean, we just talk through it. And that's been a over time process. I can tell you we just shared a document that was for heritage speakers and how we're going to effectively place our heritage and advantage speakers into different language classes. We had 9 eyes on it with 9 different perspectives, and they all had great input. How are we going to get this to the kids at the middle school? Who's going to do it? What questions are we asking? How are we asking? How are we including people? So we just talk through it.
Excellent. Yeah, we learned a lot, and we really thank you, Katrina, for this outstanding and very useful webinar.